And so, the high-powered, high-energy, high-promoter, type A personality who looks as if they're ultimately successful is not what Jesus is talking about here. Let me break apart the meaning of the word this morning. First of all, the meek are mighty. What do you mean? How so? Well, let's ask ourselves this question. When all is said and done, who is the strongest? The person who gives into anger in his household, goes into a rage, and becomes verbally abusive over something, vents his frustration because he has the ability and the freedom and thinks he has the authority to do so? Or is it the man or woman who remains calm and poised and internally strong, controlled, disciplined, knows who they are, knows in whom they believe? Who is the stronger person? I don't agree with everything Robert Schuller ever said or preached, but here's something he said I thought was very powerful. The powerful are mighty when they have learned to restrain their power. They know that real might lies in control and discipline, lest they rip out young plants along with weeds and tear out the tender shoots of human kindness and gentleness. They are those who remain gentle while they build strength, who are merciful while they are mighty. Blessed are they, for they shall not merely win a war, they shall win the hearts of a nation. The meek are those who are not easily provoked, not easily irritated, not unmanageable. You don't have to handle them with kid gloves, as we used to say. Have you ever had the occasion to deal with someone with whom you always had to try to be ready all the time to diffuse the negativity that you knew was going to come? And you try not to get too close to them because you don't want to catch what they have. The meek are those who allow God to take control. It's related to the first beatitude, as I said before. Those who are poor in spirit, those who are aware that without Him, they're dead in the water anyway. It has to do with a patient, humble outlook on life, patient under injuries, strong in the midst of sickness and adversity, not resentful, forbearing, submissive, not vain, not haughty, not proud, but powerful because they are full of the Spirit of God and because they know who they are and they know in whom they trust. Reminds me too of the story of the preacher who was just starting out and thought that he had the world by the tail, that he could speak and everyone would listen and everyone would give him the accolades. And the story has it he was sitting in the front seat next to his mentor teacher. The old pastor watched as the young preacher went to the platform and approached the pulpit and began to preach. He knew quickly that this young fellow was in for a bit of a rude awakening, as he looked like he was a bit arrogant, a bit overconfident. And he watched and listened, and it didn't go well at all. The young preacher finished and looked very despondent as he stepped down from the platform, and he said to his teacher, he said, "So how do you feel I did?" "Well," he said, "if you had gone up the way you came down, you would have come down the way you went up." No, you're not seeing double. Figure it out. The meek are mighty. They're strong. They know in whom they believe. Secondly, the meek are emotionally controlled. It's a tall order. It's hard work. It's definitely pushing against the tide. Daily life will tempt you to be anything but meek. It's being strong enough to be gentle in whatever situation you find yourself. You know what? I believe that a person who knows Jesus, who has the Spirit of God, there is such a thing as divine poise, divine balance. And you know what? It can be the strongest witness you could ever have to an unbeliever, that you remain cool, calm, and collected in the midst of a crisis or very difficult circumstances. The way that believers, those who are part of His kingdom, react to life is supposed to be different from the way the rest of the world does. Those who are meek hold themselves in check when the temptations are there to speak too fast or to say something without thinking, or, as they say, to put their tongue in motion before they engage their brain. The meek are those who control their emotions. They avoid distractions. They avoid temptations, that they're not wowed by the star-studded performer and dancer who stimulates their sexual appetite or tempts them for money or fame or notoriety. They don't succumb easily. Yes, they go through their ups and downs, but they manage to stay focused. They refuse to give in at the first setback or discouragement, and they keep going. They never quit. They keep going. They're persistent. They hang in there, and they stay there until the siren goes to end the game. It's the emotionally stable who win the battle. They're people of substance, not just style. They're people of character, not just facade. They wait, they patiently hold on. They wait for God to step in His time and in His way. They do not take matters into their own hands and leave God out of it. Some of you are already thinking, yes, Moses, wasn't he? Wasn't he the meekest man who ever lived? Yes, he was. He's a model leader, head and shoulders above any before him, but he was not a tyrant. He doesn't stand above the people. He doesn't stand apart from them. He stays identified with them. Listen to what he says in Exodus chapter 33 and verse 12. If your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. He identifies with them. He doesn't coerce. He loses his cool at one point, of course, and strikes the rock instead of speaking to it. But he submits to the God who is ultimately in control and knows that he will not now enter the promised land. The meekest man who ever lived. Apart, of course, from the Lord himself. Thirdly, the meek are teachable. The meek are mighty. The meek are emotionally controlled. The meek are teachable. The ones who don't have a know-it-all attitude. They're not defensive. They're not on an ego trip. George Washington Carver, the scientist who developed hundreds of useful products from the peanut, said, when I was young, I said to God, God, tell me the mystery of the universe. But God answered, that knowledge is reserved for me alone. So I said, God, tell me the mystery of the peanut. Then God said, well, George, that's more nearly your size, and he showed me. The meek are adaptable. They don't mind changing. They don't mind adjusting, making a mainstream correction. They know the limits of their knowledge. They do not try to impress. They're eager to listen to what others have to say. Happy are those who do not mind admitting that a little learning is not dangerous and a little correction never hurts anyone. Happy are those who are never too old to learn and don't use the excuse that an old dog can't learn a few new tricks. Come on, some of you know the difference of that. The ability to say, I was wrong and you were right. The ability to say, I'd rather change my mind and succeed than have my own way and fail. It's not those who put themselves down, though. It's those who say, God's my helper. I will listen. I will learn. I will grow. I will become the best person I can be for God. I will do everything He calls me to do. I will prepare my mind. I will prepare my heart. I will think of God in a big way, that He is able for everything. Do you know that meekness, it occurred to me as I was thinking this through, meekness is our end of the deal when Jesus says that He was going to send another comforter to guide us and lead us into all truth. Meekness is our end of the deal. Meekness is saying, I will allow the Holy Spirit to guide me and correct me and lead me and teach me. It's our side of it. I am to let God lead me and guide me. It's like saying, Jesus, I'll drive, but you're just going to have to tell me where to go. You're going to have to be my GPS. If you tell me to turn right, I'll turn right. If you tell me to turn left, I'll turn left. If you tell me to turn around, I'll turn around. If you tell me to stop, I'll stop. I'm just simply turning my destination over to you. You're my teacher. You're my trainer. You're my Lord. It's being sensitive to the voice of God. Meek people keep their head, keep their focus. They use their intellect and energy for God's glory. When God calls them to stand up and be bold, they submit and they speak up, not just to get something off their chest, but they speak up because they know that God is calling them to do it. They step up to the plate. They simply live in the Spirit. They walk in the Spirit. They admit they don't have all the answers, but they look to Him who does. And I will say to you this morning that we as pastors and leaders and board members, we have to be courageous, godly leaders, but we too have to be humble enough to say we don't have all the answers and we're still learning. We'll keep learning. Reminds me in teacher training. Years ago, and I remember they would tell us time and again, don't ever bluff a student and tell them that if they ask you a question, you don't know the answer, don't just kind of fiddle your way through it thinking you have the answer. It's better to say, well, I don't have the answer, but I will look for it and I will tell you what it is, what I find out. Never be afraid. The meek know they don't have it all together, but they're more than willing to follow the one who does. And finally, the meek are kind. They're mighty, they're strong, strength under control. They're emotionally stable. They're teachable. And the meek are kind. That is probably the overriding meaning, perhaps, of the word meek. I'm so grateful that this was the impression that I was given of Jesus when I was a kid in Sunday school. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Disciples want to just ignore all of those children. Tell them to go away. Can't you hear them? Don't you know, Master, that you are now a big-time traveling evangelist? You don't have time for kids. Just send those dirty-nosed kids back to their parents. You've got more important things to do than play with kids. But that's what Jesus loved to do. He said, bring them to me. Bring them on. Bring them on. Bring them on. Suffer them to come unto me. It means let them come to me. Kindness. Happy are the sensitive spirits to other people's needs. Happy is the person who is kind and affectionate to another person's loneliness. Happy is the one who has no problem apologizing, for they're going to inherit the respect and esteem of those around them. And I think there's a couple levels to this, but one of them, when Jesus says they shall inherit the earth, there is a sense in which when you follow what Jesus says, when you follow what he says to be meek and poor in spirit and so on, you inherit the earth. You inherit the respect and esteem of those around you on this side of heaven. Of course, there's another side coming. We'll deal with that in a second.